Trumas Perk Dalet Mishnah Aleph. Hamafresh Miktas Truma U'Maisus Maitim Venu Truma Olav Avalei L'Makam Acher. The Mishnah deals with a case where someone does not separate the full amount of Truma or Maiser at one time, but first separates only some of it, intending to separate the rest later. The separated portion removes the tevel status of part of the pile, but the other part remains tevel as before. For example, if one intends to separate 2 saw of Truma from a pile of 100 saw, which would be a 50th of the total, but he first separates only 1 saw, half of the remaining 99 saw is no longer tevel. In that, its truma has been removed, but the other half is still tevel. The same halach would apply where one separates only some of the tenth that's required for meiser. Thus, the pile is a mixture of tevel and non-tevel, and we have learned that truma and meiser cannot be separated from non-tevel. Therefore, the portion of truma that he removes later is not going to be good, unless we assume that it comes from the tevel part of the pile. The question is how he would know that, obviously. So, amafish mixas truma or meiser, if one separates some of the required truma or meiser from a pile, so the pile is now part non-tevel and part tevel. Maitim Venu Truma Olav, he can remove the rest of Truma or Meiser needed for that pile from the pile itself, because it may be assumed that the new portion is being taken from the tevel part of the pile. Logic tells us that removing Truma or Meiser in stages is permitted because there are situations where this is the only way to remove Truma, for example, where the amount of Truma is too large or heavy to be lifted at once. But he cannot remove Truma or Meiser from the remainder of that pile for somewhere else, a different pile of tevel, because in this case we are concerned that perhaps the portion is from the non-tevel part of the first pile. Since it's possible to remove the Truma or Meiser for the second pile from that very pile, which is entirely Tevel, the Chachamim saw no reason to be Mekel, and let it be taken from the first pile, which Tevel is only in part. Remeir says, he can even remove Truma or Meiser from the pile for somewhere else, for in this case too, the new portion may be viewed as coming from the Tevel part of the pile. Remeir holds that since it's permitted to remove Truma or Meiser from a pile that is partly non-tevel, it makes no difference whether one is removing it for that pile or for another pile. Mishnah Beis. The Mishnah discusses a case where a person gives a saw of his produce to a Levi and another saw to an Ani, but he doesn't intend these portions to be Meiser Rishon and Meiser Ani right away, because he has not yet decided which 8 saw of his tevel he is separating them for. He intends that when he does choose the 8 saw of tevel, the saw he gave to the Levi will then become Meiser Rishon, and the saw he gave to the poor person will become Meiser Ani. The owner already separated Truma for the produce in his storehouse. He now wants to separate Meiser Rishon and Meiser Ani for just 10 saw of the remaining produce, but he doesn't want to choose those 10 saw at this time. So he gives 1 saw to a Levi and another saw to a poor person, intending to choose the other 8 saw later. To be exact, he needs to only give 0.9 saw as Meiser Ani, since Meiser Ani is a tenth of what remains after Meiser Rishon is separated, in this case 9 saw. Those Meisers will suffice to remove the tevel status of 8.1 saw of his produce. In order for this to work, the 2 saw he gave away must still exist when he chooses the tevel, since that is when the designation as Meiser Rishon and Meiser Ani is supposed to take effect. If they no longer exist, the 8 saw that he selects will remain tevel and may not be eaten until Meiser Rishon and Meiser Ani are separated again. The Mishnah is going to bring a machlekes as to whether it can be assumed that the 2 saw do in fact still exist when he selects the other 8 saw. So Misha Hayu Peresa ben Meguru, regarding one whose tevel produce was in the storeroom, Nosan Sola ben Levi Sola Ani, he gave a saw of it to a Levi and a saw of it to a poor person for the sake of 8 saw of produce that he would select later, but in the meantime the Levi and the poor person went away and we don't know what became of the portions they received. Ma'afresh Hashmainas in Va'echlan. The halacha is he may separate up to 8 saw from the produce in the storeroom and eat them because it may be assumed that the 2 saw he gave away still exist. As they talk to the Chacham say, "In ma'afresh elef yicheshbon," he may separate any produce from the storeroom only in proportion to the amount of the matanas that are known to still exist. For example, if only half of the Meiser Rishon and half of the Meiser Ani are known to be in existence, and the status of the other 2 halves is unknown, he may remove only 4 saw, which would be half of 8 saw from the storage, and eat them. Mishnah Gimel. Shir Truma. Minat Torah, there's no minimum proportion that must be separated as Truma. Even a single kernel is enough for a large pile of grain. The Chacham, however, established set proportions which are defined in the Mishnah. So Shir Truma, the measure of Truma that should be separated, Ayin Yafa Echem Re'aboim, a generous proportion is 1 part in 40, a 40th of the crop. The Chachamim identify 3 types of people: the generous, the average, and the miserly. A person who wants to give Truma generously should designate a 40th of his produce as Truma. The proportions required of average and miserly people are stated below. Beishamai Ermim Mishleishim, Beishamai say that a generous proportion is 1 out of 30. Beininus B'chamishim, the medium portion is 1/50th. The Maisli proportion is 1/60. Beis Shammai also disagree with these proportions, although the Mishnah doesn't say so. In their view, the average person should give at least a 40th, and a Maisli person should give at least a 50th. If someone separated Truma and one part of 60 came up in his hand instead of his usual proportion of 1/40th or 1/50th, Truma is valid. Truma bein tzarich litram. He doesn't need to separate any more Truma since the amount he separated meets the minimum requirement set by the Chachamim. It's fully valid, and it's released from Tevel. Chosar v'haisif. Therefore, if he went back and added Truma, he already separated the additional amount as not Truma. V'chayv v'maisus. It's Tevel that's v'chayv v'maisus as it was before. When the 1/60th portion of Truma was removed from the pile, it released the rest of the pile from any Truma requirement. So no more Truma can be separated for the pile. Thus, the extra amount that he tried to designate as Truma is not Truma at all, but it's the same as the pile from which it was taken. Namely, Tevel, which Maisus must still be separated. If, however, one part in 61 came up in his hand, which is less than any of the three proportions established by the Chachamim, for example, out of a pile of 61 sah, he separated only one sah as Truma. Truma, still good Truma, but he must go back and separate more until he reaches his usual amount of Truma. Using the previous example, if he usually separates 1/60th, then the one sah he designated as Truma covers only 60 of the 61 sah in the pile. He must now separate 1/60th of a sah for the remaining sah. And if he usually separates 1/50th, the sah he designated covers only 50 of the 61 sah. He must designate 1/50th of that remaining 11 sah. B'mida, u'b'mishkal, u'b'minyan. And this additional Truma must not be estimated as is usually required, but may be measured precisely by volume by weight or by count, which is usually not allowed. We learned that one must estimate the amount of Truma he wishes to separate and not use exact methods of measurement such as weighing, measuring the volume, or counting the pieces of fruit. The Mishnah teaches that this halacha applies only to ordinary separation of Truma and not to the additional separation that's discussed here. Since the purpose of the additional separation is to reach a specific amount, the Chacham allowed it to be measured precisely. In general, Truma must be removed from produce that's near the pile of Tevel which was being separated. According to the Tanakama, this rule applies here as well, where one is adding to Truma that was already designated. The next Tana, however, disagrees. Rabbi Yehuda says the additional portion of Truma can be separated even from produce that's not near the pile. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the reason that Truma must be taken from produce near the pile is that otherwise estimating the correct amount of Truma would be difficult. Therefore, this requirement applies only to the initial separation of Truma, which must be estimated, and not to the additional separation of Truma, which may be measured exactly. Mishnah Daled. Ha'omer l'shluchai. If one says to a shliach, go ahead and separate Truma from my crop, the shliach should separate Truma according to the owner's character. That is, he should separate 1/40th of the crop for a generous person, and 60th for a miserly person, and a 50th for the average person. If he doesn't know the owner's character, he separates an amount of Truma that corresponds to the medium portion, which is 1/50th. If the shliach cannot tell whether the bailam is generous, average, or miserly, he should assume that the owner is like most people who separates 1/50th. What happens if the owner is an average person who gives 1/50th, but the shliach separated more than a 50th or less than that? If he mistakenly subtracted 10 from the 50 parts out of which the owner usually separates one part of Truma, that is, he separated 1 in 40, the owner is an average person and usually gives 1/50th as Truma, but the shliach thought that he's generous and separated a 40th. Or he mistakenly added 10 to the 50 parts out of which the owner usually separates one part of Truma. It means he separated one part in 60. The agent judged that the owner is miserly and therefore separated only the 60th. Truma said Truma, it's valid Truma since he made his best judgment of the owner's character and separated an amount befitting the judgment. He did what he was asked to do, and thus the designation is effective. Since the owner did not tell the agent how much Truma to separate, he implied that he will rely on the shliach's judgment of his character, agreeing to accept what the shliach decides. The agent then made an honest estimation of the owner's character and separated the amount that the chacham established for that type of person. In view of the fact that the shliach obeyed the owner's instruction, his Truma's designation is effective. Meaning, even though it may not be kedai to Shabbat Bayis 100%, but being that the Baal Bayis is being samich on the shliach, so that's going to be good. However, if he knew that the owner usually separates one part in 50 and he intentionally added even one to the number of parts for which the owner usually separates, that is, he separated a part in 51, in Truma, so Truma, his Truma is not valid Truma because he did not carry out the owner's instructions. If the shliach knew the owner's das, but deliberately separated less than the amount established by the Chacham for someone of that character, he did not carry out what the owner implied he should do. Because he deviated from the Bailam's instructions, he cannot be considered the owner shliach, and the truma he separated is no good because he did not do the shlichus that he was supposed to do. Mishnah Hey. Hamarbe betruma, if one wants to separate more truma than necessary from his pile of produce, or blezer eme echad me'asara, he can designate a maximum of 1 part in 10 as truma ketrumas meiser. Just like we find that the different types of trumas meiser is 1/10 of meiser. Yes, he can, but if he designated more than this amount, in which case the designated portion contains 2 parts, 1/10 itself, which is truma, the extra part, which is tevel. The amount that is above the 1/10 limit for truma is tevel, just like the remainder of the pile. Although it is no longer mechuyev in truma because truma has been designated for the whole pile, meisers must still be designated for it. So yaseno, trumas meiser l'makom acher. He needs to make it the extra part, trumas meiser, for the produce that's in another place, and give the entire portion that he separated to a kain. In theory, he could remove the tevel status of the extra amount by designating other produce as meisers for it, or by designating that amount itself as meiser. However, the extra amount would still be usher to non-kehana because it's mixed together with 1/10, which is truma. We don't know which part is chulin and which part is truma. So the Bailam is therefore advised to take an extra amount of trumas meiser, which anyways needs to be eaten only by a kain, and then give the entire mixture to a kain. Of course, trumas meiser can be designated only for meiser rishon. Thus, the owner must first designate meiser rishon for his produce, making sure to include the extra amount in the meiser rishon, and then he can designate the extra amount as trumas meiser. The Tana of this Mishnah follows the view that a Yisrael can separate trumas meiser from his meiser rishon, that it's not necessary for a Levi to do so. The solution, however, works only in limited circumstances. Had this person designated exactly 10% of the pile as truma, meiser rishon would be 9% of the pile, and trumas meiser would be 0.9% of the pile. Thus, if you went above the 10% maximum and separated anywhere up to 10.9% as truma, the amount above 10% can be designated as trumas meiser for this pile. But any amount above 10.9% will have to be designated as trumas meiser for a different pile. When the Mishnah says that he should make the extra amount trumas meiser for produce in another place, it refers to cases like this where he cannot designate all the trumas meiser for the original pile, but he must designate some of it for another pile. Rabbi Shmuel says, Mechta chulun and mechta truma. One can separate truma up to the point where the pile is half chulun and half truma, that is, the maximum is half. Rabbi Shmuel learns this from the pasuk, which says that truma is rashis to gancha, the first of your grain. He understands that the pasuk means to equate the truma portion to the remaining produce. Meaning the first could be the same as your grain. Thus, the truma can be no larger than the amount of produce that remains after the truma has been separated. That is, the truma may not exceed half of all the produce. Rabbi Tar from Rabbi Kiva say, one can designate as much truma as he wants, provided that he leaves some chulun there in the pile. Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Tarfon understand that the pasuk reishis to gancha to mean that some distinction must be made between the truma and the reishis. This means that in practice, you can designate as much truma as you want, provided that at least some small amount of produce remains. Kulash Nagamara, reishis, you need to have reishis around the karim. You need to have reishis with a little bit left over. Mishnah Vav. B'shleisha prakim misharim is hakalkala. We learned that the amount of truma to be separated must be determined by estimation. However, when separating meiser and trumas meiser, which the Torah sets a fixed amount, it's preferable to avoid estimation and use exact methods of measurements instead. Thus, before separating meiser, the owner should measure exactly how much produce he has, that he can designate precisely 1/10 as meiser. The Mishnah begins by discussing a particular method for calculating how many fruits are separated as meiser. One first counts fruits one by one into a basket until it's full, so he knows the number of fruits in the basket. He knows the number of fruits the basket holds. Then every time he fills up the basket, he separates 1/10 of that number as meiser. However, this method is not entirely reliable because the sun dries the fruits through the summer, making them smaller, and the basket can thus hold more fruits, and he must separate a larger amount of fruits from meiser than he did at first. So the Mishnah teaches how to deal with this problem. So at 3 stages during the summer, one assesses how many fruits the basket can hold. Babakurais, at the time of the early fruits, when they're at their largest, and the basket holds the smallest number. Ubasyafais, and at the end of the late fruits, when they're at their smallest, and the basket holds the largest number. And in midsummer, when they're medium size, the basket holds the medium number. For example, he measures the basket at the beginning of the season and sees that it can hold 100 fruits. From then until midsummer, he can assume that each basket holds 100 fruits, and as he separates 10 fruits from each basket as meiser. And midsummer, he measures the basket again and sees that it holds 110. From that point until near the end of the harvest season, he separates 11 fruits from each basket as meiser. Towards the end of the harvest season, he measures the basket for the last time and sees that it can hold 150. From then until the very end of the harvest, he separates 15 fruits from each basket full as meiser. Hamayna meshubach, one who counts his fruits is more praiseworthy than one who uses estimation. Estimation is not as praiseworthy as counting, but it is permitted. And one who measures the volume is more praiseworthy than he, because he's measuring a more exact method of calculation than counting. Counting, for example, 100 figs and then setting aside 10 as meiser does not take into account the slight differences in the sizes of the individual figs. In contrast, if one measures the total volume, for example, he measures 50 saw and separates 5 saw as meiser, the differences between the individual fruits are not going to be significant. And one who weighs his fruits is more praiseworthy than 3 of them, because weighing is the most exact method of all. Even measuring the volume is flawed, because it doesn't take into account the spaces between the individual fruits. Weighing, however, is not affected by the spaces. And obviously, we're talking about where he's weighing them properly, and honestly, him tzedek, veifas tzedek, and he's not playing any shtick with his weights and his scales. Mishnah Zayin, Rabbi Lezer, Oimer Truma Oila Be'echad Ubeya, Rabbi Shua Oimer B'meya Va'oy. From here until the end of the next parak, the Mishnah will focus on cases where Truma became mixed with Chulin. Ordinarily, if dry food which was Osir became mixed with dry food which was mutter of the same type, for example, if a piece of non-kosher meat becomes mixed with pieces of kosher meat, and we cannot tell them apart, as long as you have roiv, it will become batel b'roiv, and all the pieces are mutter. In Yeridei, assuming Kuf Tesif Aleph, it discusses whether one person may eat the entire mixture, and whether the mixture may be eaten at one time. We're discussing here dried foods of the same type that were not cooked together. Liquid foods, different types of foods, or foods that were cooked together are generally subject to other halachas, and we will discuss a little more about this in Perek Yud. Minatera, the same applies to truma that falls into chulin. If it becomes batel b'roiv, it can be eaten by a kain, and it's fine. If the majority is chulin, it may be eaten by a non-kain. The Chacham, however, were geyser that the mixture is not mutter unless it's at least 1 part truma in 101 total parts. If it contains a smaller amount of chulin, it's aser. Such a prohibited mixture is known as meduma. Additionally, even if that ratio is met, the mixture remains forbidden until an amount of produce that's equal to the amount of truma that fell in is removed from the mixture. For example, if 1 saw of truma fell into the mixture, 1 saw of produce must be removed from the mixture. The reason for this requirement is that truma is regarded as a property of the kahanim as a group. Thus, if the entire mixture would be eaten by a non-kain, there would be a loss for the kahana. The Chacham therefore decreed that the entire mixture remains forbidden until a portion equivalent to the truma is removed from the mixture. That portion is given to the kain and treated as truma. So Rabbi Lezer says truma oil be'echad umeya. Truma can be mixed into chulin, is nullified. Oila means it's lifted, referring to the fact that the mixture is permitted after lifting out an amount of produce that is equal to the truma. For the sake of simplicity, though, we will translate this term as nullified in this Mishnah and in those that follow. So truma that became mixed into chulin is nullified. There's 1 part truma and a total of at least 101 parts of chulin. The truma combined. For example, if 1 saw of truma fell into chulin, the mixture must contain 100 saw of chulin to nullify it. The mixture thus contains a total of 101 parts. 1 saw of the mixture is removed and given to a kain. The rest of the produce may then be eaten by a non-kain. Rabbi Shua says b'meya va'oy. The truma is nullified even if there's 1 part truma and a total of 100 parts and somewhat more. Va'oy ze ein leishir, and this somewhat more has no minimum amount. Thus, if, for example, 1 saw of truma fell into slightly more than 99 saw of chulin, the truma is batel. Here too, 1 saw is removed from the mixture and given to the kain, and the rest of the produce is permitted to a non-kain. Rabbi Yossi ben Meshulam Omer v'oid kav l'me'asa, and the somewhat more mentioned is a kav, which is a 1/6 of a saw per 100 saw of produce. Shtus lamed ameya. Thus, that somewhat more that we mentioned is 1/6 of the amount of truma that asers the mixture. Therefore, if 1 saw of truma fell into 99 saw of chulin, the mixture is aser. There must be at least 99 saw plus 1/6 of the amount that fell, which in this case would be 1/6 of a saw of chulin, for a total mixture of 100 saw plus 1/6 of a saw for the mixture to be mutter. In other words, if 1 saw of truma fell into at least 99 and 1/6 saw of chulin, the truma is nullified. 1 saw is removed from the mixture and given to a kain, and the rest of the produce is mutter. If the mixture did not contain the minimum amount necessary for the truma to become batel, the mixture is meduma. The entire mixture must be sold to a kain at the price of truma, which is lower than the price of chulin. In addition, the value of the truma that was mixed in, which belongs to the kahana, must be deducted from the amount the kohen is charged. Mishnah Ches. According to the first view in the previous Mishnah, if one part of truma became mixed with 100 parts of chulun, the truma is batal. The previous Mishnah brought a three-way machlokes as to the exact amount of chulun needed to be mevatel truma. Now, our explanation of the Mishnah and those that follow will be following the sheet of Rebbe Lezer, who holds that the required ratio is 100 parts chulun to 1 part of truma, since his view is followed in a number of Mishnayos. So this Mishnah and the ones that follow deal with the cases in which one part of truma becomes mixed with 100 parts of chulun, but the truma that fell in is a different color, size, or shape from some of the chulun. So to Einim Shchayris Mala says halavonis. If white truma figs became mixed into a mixture of white and black chulun figs, the black chulun figs join the white chulun figs to nullify the white truma figs. Lavonis Mala says hashchayris, and in a case where black figs of truma became mixed into a mixture of white and black chulun figs, the white chulun figs join the black chulun figs to nullify the black truma figs. For example, the mixture consists of 100 figs of chulun, 50 white, 50 black. If one white fig of truma fell into the mixture, all the chulun figs combine to nullify the truma fig in 100 to 1 ratio. After one white fig is removed from the mixture, the rest of the figs may be eaten. Similarly, if one black fig of truma fell into the pile, the fig may be eaten after one black fig is removed from the mixture. Now, since we know that truma fig is white or black, it would not seem logical to include figs of other colors in the count, since all these figs are certainly chulun. Nevertheless, they are included, since if one would mash all 101 figs, both the white and black together, it would be impossible to tell the figs apart. At that point, the truma fig would be nullified in the 100 chulun figs. Even though they were not mashed at this point, you view all the figs as if they were mashed together, and the truma fig is thus nullified. The reason why the Chacham allowed this is because the requirement that there be 100 parts chulun to 1 part truma is midrabanon. Because it's the rabbanon, if truma falls into chulun, it becomes batal if there's a rev of chulun. Therefore, the Chacham allowed us to view the figs as if they were all mashed together, and the black chulun figs combined with the white ones to nullify the truma fig. And technically speaking, if it would be deraisa, it wouldn't be so simple to allow this. I mean, if I can't, deraisa, you wouldn't have to go through this lumdus, because deraisa automatically it's batal b'roiv. But midrabanon, even when it's not batal b'roiv, there's makom to be mekel. Igulei dvela. Similarly, if there's a mixture of small and large round fig cakes, in the times of the Mishnah, it was common to press figs together in round or rectangular vessels, thus creating fig cakes of chulun, and a small or large cake of truma became mixed in. So the large chulun cakes joined the small ones to be mevatel, the small truma cakes, in a case where small cakes of truma became mixed in. This is true even when there are less than 100 cakes altogether. For example, there are 50 small fig cakes and 25 large ones, which are twice the weight of the small ones. A small fig cake of truma then became mixed into the group. The halacha is that all the chulun cakes combine to nullify the cake of truma, since the weight of the chulun cake is 100 times that of the truma cake. One small cake must be removed, and the rest of the cakes are then permitted. And the small chulun cakes join the large ones to nullify the large truma cakes in a case where large cakes of truma became mixed in. For example, a large fig cake became mixed into a group of 50 large cakes of chulun and 50 small ones. The cake of truma is bottled since there are 100 cakes of chulun, even though there are only 50 cakes of its weight. The Chacham were even more mekel here and consider the cake of truma nullified, even though the total weight of the cakes is less than 100 times the weight of the cake of truma. But you do have 100 times more, even though in the weight you don't have 100 times more. But Igulim Mailam as Hamalbanim. Similarly, if there's a mixture of round and rectangular fig cakes of chulun and a cake of truma became mixed in, the round fig cakes join the rectangular cakes to nullify the rectangular truma cakes in the case where the rectangular cakes of truma got mixed in. Hamalbanim Mailam as Igulim. And the rectangular and the square ones can nullify the round ones. In the case where round cakes of truma became mixed in. In all of these cases, even though the truma is clearly different in some way from that of the chulun of which it fell into, all the chulun is nevertheless counted in order to nullify it regardless of the shape. Rebbe Lezer Oyser. In the above cases, Rebbe Lezer forbids all the chulun figs that are the same type as the truma. For example, if a white fig of truma became mixed into a mixture of 50 white and 50 black figs of chulun, all the white figs are forbidden to a non-kohen. Rebbe Lezer disagrees with the Rishu on this issue because he holds that since the black figs look different from the white ones and are certainly chulun, they cannot be viewed as part of the mixture to be mevatel. Moreover, if the color of the fig of truma that became mixed in is not known, then all the figs are osir. For example, if a truma fig of an unknown color became mixed into a mixture of 100 white and black chulin figs, it's not batal. The reason for this is as follows. Although we don't know the color of the fig that became mixed in, it was definitely either white or black. If we would know its color, it would not be batal, whichever color it is, since only figs of that color are counted to nullify it. And there are not enough figs of either color to be mevatel the truma. Therefore, the fact that we do know the color of the fig doesn't change the matters, and the fig is not batal. Rabbi Kiva says, when it's known what type of truma fell into the chulin, each type of chulin does not nullify the truma figs of the other type, and all the figs that are the same type as the fig of truma are aser. Rabbi Kiva agrees to Rabbi Elazar's ruling at this point. Since any fig that's definitely not a truma fig may be eaten by a non-kohen. For example, if a black fig fell into the mixture and all the white ones are mutter, the permitted figs cannot count towards the 100 parts of chulin needed to nullify the truma. Thus, all the figs that are the same type as the fig of truma may not be eaten. When it's not known what type of truma item fell in, then each type nullifies truma figs of the other type, and all the figs are mutter. Here, Rabbi Kiva does not agree with Rabbi Elazar. He reasons that since a non-kohen may not eat any of the figs in this mixture, since any one of them could be truma, all the figs in the mixture count towards 100 parts of chulin needed to nullify the truma. Thus, the truma is batal, and after removing one fig from the mixture, all the others are going to be mutter. Mishnah Tes. Ketzad. The Mishnah is going to give examples to show Rabbi Kiva's ruling in the previous Mishnah. Ketzad. Chamishim te'enim shchayros chamishim levanois. Take an example. A mixture consisting of 50 black and 50 white figs of chulin. Nafla shchayra. If a black fig of truma fell into the mixture, shchayros asurais felvanos mutarais. All the black figs are aser, and all the white ones are mutter. Nafla levana. If a white fig of truma fell into the mixture, levanos asurais ushchayros mutarais. All the white ones are aser, and all the black ones are mutter. This is an example of the first part of Rabbi Kiva's statement in the previous Mishnah, where he holds like Rabbi Elazar. But if he doesn't know what color fig fell in, it cannot be that we know that the mixture had exactly 50 white and 50 black chulin figs. If that was so, we could figure out the color of the truma fig simply by counting, which one there's more of. If there are now 51 white figs in the mixture, then the truma fig was white. If there are 51 black figs, then we know it was black. So the case must be that the exact amount of white and black figs in the original mixture is unknown. So Mailazu, each type nullifies the truma fig of the other type, and they're all mutter. This is an example of the second part of Rabbi Kiva's statement in the previous Mishnah, where he holds like Rabbi Yeshua. Ubezu, in the case where the truma is a different color, size, or shape than some of the chulin, Rabbi Elazar machmer Rabbi Yeshua mekel. Rabbi Elazar holds stringently while Rabbi Yeshua rules leniently. However, in similar cases, which will be detailed in the next Mishnah, Rabbi Elazar is mekel and Rabbi Yeshua is machmer. And with this, we go into Mishnah Yod, Ubezu Rabbi Elazar mekel, Rabbi Yeshua machmer. However, in the following case, the reverse is true. Rabbi Elazar is mekel and Rabbi Yeshua is machmer. But there is litrik tziyus al pi akad, in the case of one who presses a litra, which is a measure of weight, which is approximately 12 and a half ounces of dried truma figs in the mouth of a jug containing dried chulin figs. That is, dried figs had previously been pressed into the jug, and now he's pressing truma figs on top of them, at the mouth of the jug. Dried figs were commonly pressed into utensils. And he doesn't know in the mouth of which jug of chulin figs he pressed them. Rabbi Elazar says, even though the truma figs are definitely in the mouth of one of the jugs, we view the truma figs as they were separated and spread throughout the jug. Thus, the lower figs in the jug nullify the litra of truma that's among the upper figs. This is speaking in a case where there are a number of jugs, with each jug containing 100 litra of chulin. Rabbi Elazar holds that although the lower figs in each jug are definitely chulin, they're nevertheless counted towards 100 litra of chulin needed to nullify the litra of truma. Thus, even if there are less than 100 jugs of definite chulin, 1 litra is removed from the top of one of the jugs, and the rest of the figs may be eaten. The reason Rabbi Elazar is mekel here is similar to the reason Rabbi Yeshua was mekel in Mishnah Ches. Min ha-Torah, truma is batal if you have rev chulin. Therefore, min ha-Torah, the figs of truma, are batal in the figs from the other jugs. The Chacham were therefore mekel in this case and viewed all the figs in each jug as if they were mixed together. What we must understand is why then was Rabbi Elazar machmir in Mishnah Ches and did not include the figs of different color, size, or shape in the count. The answer is that l'shitas Rabbi Elazar, when the chulin figs look different from the fig of truma, it's impossible to view them as mixed together because you can always tell them apart. Here, however, all the figs look exactly alike, and there's no makom to say that they're separate. The truma figs are merely separate from the chulin, and it doesn't prevent us from viewing them as if they're all mixed together. Rabbi Yeshua says, the truma is not bottled unless there are 100 more jugs. So the upper figs in all the jugs can by themselves nullify the truma. The lower figs in all the jugs, though, do not count towards being mevatel the truma. According to Rabbi Yeshua, only the figs in the mouths of the jug count towards the amount of chulin needed to nullify the truma. There's only if there's at least 101 jugs in total will the figs nullify the truma in the mouth of one of the jugs. Otherwise, the truma is not nullified, and the figs in the mouth of every jug are aser. The lower figs in all the jugs, however, are permitted since they are definitely not the truma. Rabbi Yeshua was makel in the cases of Mishnah Ches, because in those cases all the figs are mixed together. Here, however, the truma figs are separate from the chulin, so we cannot view all the figs as if they're all mixed together. Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua thus take opposite approaches as to when all the figs can be counted to be mevatel the truma. Rabbi Lezer holds that when the figs do not look different from the truma, they can be combined even if they're physically separated. Rabbi Yeshua, on the other hand, holds that they can be counted as long as they're not separated, even though they look different. The very statistic of machlekes and how to understand the concept of bittul. Mishnah Yod Aleph, Sa truma shenafla al pi megura. If a sav truma fell on top of chulin grain at the opening of a storage room, v'kafa, and one skimmed off the top layer of grain, the truma became mixed with chulin at the opening of the storage room and could not be identified, but was clearly somewhere at the opening. In an effort to remove the truma, the top layer, which is a mixture of truma and chulin, was skimmed off. However, the grain removed contained only part of the truma, and truma remained in the storage room as well. Rabbi Lezer says, if the skimmed layer along the rest of the grain in the storage room contained 100 saw of chulin aside from the saw of truma totaling 101 saw, the truma is bottled in 101 total saw. Rabbi Lezer follows his view in the previous Mishnah, where he holds that even though we know that the bottom of the pile contains only chulin, we count all the grain towards the 100 parts we need to be mevatel the truma. This halacha certainly applies as the top layer is not skimmed off. Rabbi Lezer is teaching that his shita applies even when one skims off the top layer and attempts to remove the truma, thus showing that the bottom part of the storeroom is chulin. We could have thought that this prevents the truma from being bottled by the produce on the bottom part of the storeroom, which is certainly chulin. Rabbi Lezer therefore teaches that the bottom part is included in the count of 100 parts, and the truma will be bottled. Rabbi Yeshua says, Loi Sala, it's not bottled since the bottom of the pile, which is definitely chulin, is not included in the suffix. Rabbi Yeshua is consistent with the shita in the previous Mishnah, where he holds that if we know that the truma is on top of the mixture, the chulin on the bottom cannot be included in the 100 saw required to be mevatel the truma. So truma shenafla al pi megura. In the case where a saw of truma fell on top of chulin grain at the opening of a storage room, yikpiyano. One should skim off enough of the top layer of the grain so that all the truma has definitely been removed. That is, he should skim off more from the top until he's certain that he removed all the truma. The remainder is then permitted to a non-kain. The rest of the grain is permitted because it's definitely all chulin. But if it's true that removing some of the grain can permit the rest of it, if the eitzah is that you're supposed to take everything off the top, so now you separated the truma and the chulin, so in which case did the Chachamim say that in order to be involved in the truma, they became mixed in the grain in the storage room, there must be at least one part of truma and 101 total parts. Why not just skim off all the truma, and then the rest is going to be mutter? So sagt the Mishnah, "Main you do it in blue like saying, oila ayin nofla." The Chachamim required 101 total parts, where it's not known whether the truma and chulin became mixed together after the truma fell on top of the pile. That is, there's reason to suspect that the truma may have become mixed into the lower parts of the pile, so that removing the top layer will not necessarily remove the truma. Or where it's not known where in the pile the truma fell to begin with. Since it may have fallen anywhere in the pile, we cannot skim off the places where it fell. Mishnah Yud Beis. Shtei kupos or shtei meguras. If the two boxes or two storage rooms, with each box or storage room containing 50 saw of chulin, that is, each one contains approximately 50 saw, so there's a total of 100 saw between the two containers. Shenafla saw truma l'teich achas mehen, and a saw of truma fell into one of them. Ve'en yadu le'ez men nafla. It's not known into which one of them it fell. Ma'lezu ezu. The halacha is that they're mevatel each other. That is, the contents of the boxes or storage rooms are considered as if they are joined together to be mevatel the truma. Since there's a total of 100 saw of chulin between the two containers, the contents are permitted to a non-kain after removing one saw, which is given to a kain. One may remove that saw from either box or storage house, even though half of a saw from one and the second half, or even half a saw from one and the second half from the other. The Chacham consider the contents of both boxes or rooms as if they are combined, based on the fact that all the grain, whether it's in the box or whether it's in the storage room, is part of the suffix. However, they allow this only if both the containers are in one location, or if they may eventually be combined. Now, boxes are moved from place to place, and their contents are at times combined. Therefore, even if the boxes were not in the same house, but in the same town, the combined volume of both boxes determines whether the truma that fell into one of them is nullified. Storage rooms, however, cannot be moved from place to place, therefore they are not considered combined unless they are in one house. Reb Shimon Omer, afilu hem b'shtei hayaros ma'ila zu hazu. The Tanakama holds that the contents of the boxes or storerooms are viewed as being combined, is limited to boxes that are in the same town or storerooms in the same house. The Mishnah is going to bring a shita of Reb Shimon, which says that even if the two boxes or storerooms are in different cities, ma'ila zu hazu, the halacha is that they nullify each other. Reb Shimon holds that as long as the contents of both boxes or storerooms are part of a single suffix, they're viewed as being combined to nullify the truma. The fact that it is unlikely that they will ever be combined is not a factor. Mishnah Yud Gimel, the final Mishnah of the parak. Amr Reb Yosi. Reb Yosi said, "Ma'isa balufnei Reb Akiva b'chamisha maguda shel yarak." An incident came before Reb Akiva involving 50 bundles of chulin vegetables. Shenafla achs mehen l'teichen chetzis truma, into which another similar bundle, half of which was truma, fell. V'amarti l'fanav tala. I said before him it should be a bottle. Lo yishach truma tala b'chamisha ve'echad. The reason is not because truma can be nullified in a total of 51 total parts. One might have thought that since the bundle is part of the truma and part chulin, the entire bundle is considered truma. Saying that the truma is nullified in 50 bundles of chulin would thus mean that one part truma is nullified in 50 parts of chulin, which is not the case. Rather, we include only the actual truma in the calculation. Since only half of the bundle that fell in was truma, and there were only 102 half bundles, it is batel. That is, the one part truma that was batel in 102 total parts. Had there been only 101 half bundles, it would have been nullified as well. In this case, however, there happened to have been 102 half bundles. Rabbi Kiva was silent, showing that he was maskim, and he agreed to Rabbi Yosi's psak.